At exactly 11:47 p.m., the shrill ring of the phone cut through the silence of the Walker residence. Amara Johnson, a 32-year-old Black American woman, stirred awake in the darkness. She had been sleeping restlessly, her body curled instinctively toward the empty side of the bed where her husband usually lay. The space beside her was cold, untouched for hours. Her husband, Ethan Walker, 35 years old, a white American construction mogul, was not home. That fact alone was not unusual anymore, but the timing of the call made her heart leap with unease. "Hello," Amara whispered, her hand trembling slightly as she pressed the phone to her ear. On the other end, there was silence, except for the faint sound of someone's nervous breathing. Heavy, uneven, as though they were summoning the courage to speak. Amara's pulse quickened. Finally, a voice broke through. "Amara, I'm so sorry to call this late." It was Nia Brooks, Amara's closest friend since college. Nia, a 33-year-old Black woman, had been the kind of friend who once split her last $50 to help Amara pay rent when they were 20. Nia never called at midnight. Her voice now carried a sadness Amara had never heard before. Amara sat up straighter in bed. "Nia, what's wrong?" There was another pause, and Nia said softly, "I don't know how to tell you this, but you need to know." A chill settled over Amara's skin. "I saw Ethan tonight." Nia continued, her voice shaking. "He was at the Fairmont Hotel downtown, and he wasn't alone." Amara gripped the phone tighter. "Who was he with?" Nia inhaled sharply, as though saying the name might wound them both. "He was with Sloane Hart." The name landed like a punch to Amara's stomach. Sloane Hart, 28. Tall, blonde, and one of America's most recognizable supermodels. She was the kind of woman who graced magazine covers, walked Paris runways, and was constantly photographed with movie stars and billionaires. Everything Amara wasn't. Where Sloane's fair skin and golden hair caught the light, Amara's smooth, deep brown skin and natural black curls carried their own quiet radiance, but not in the glamorous, world-famous way Ethan now apparently craved. Where strangers worshipped Sloane, Amara was an interior designer. With a modest business she had worked tirelessly to grow. She had always believed her husband admired her independence, creativity, and warmth. But now, "Are you sure it was Ethan?" Amara asked, though the weight in her chest told her she already knew. "Amara," Nia's voice broke. "I wouldn't call you like this unless I were sure." They were holding hands, and they kissed. "I'm so sorry." For a moment, Amara couldn't breathe. The phone trembled in her hand. She stared across the room at the carefully chosen photographs, the wedding portrait above the dresser, the framed candid shot of Ethan laughing in Central Park, the watercolor print she'd bought to make their bedroom feel warmer. The walls, the furniture, the memories all felt like they were mocking her now. She whispered, "How long have you known?" "This is the first time I've seen them together," Nia said quickly. "But..." They looked comfortable, like it wasn't new. Amara closed her eyes, letting the silence stretch until she could hear only her uneven breathing. When she finally hung up, she didn't cry. She just sat in the dark, staring at the emptiness around her, as if her entire life had been rewritten in a single phone call. Hours passed. Amara thought about the little signs she had pushed aside, the new cologne Ethan had started wearing, the secretive way he kept his phone turned over on the counter, the mysterious credit card charges for dinners at places she had never been. She remembered the increasing number of business trips that never added up. She had told herself she was being paranoid. Although her marriage was solid, Ethan still loved her like he had when they were 24 and 27. Two dreamers starting together. But now, at 32, she knew the truth would come crashing down. At 3:05 a.m., headlights swept across the living room walls. Amara heard the hum of Ethan's expensive car pulling into the driveway. She didn't move. She sat silently, her hands folded in her lap, listening quietly as the front door opened. Footsteps padded across the hardwood, careful like a man who did not want to wake his wife. He went upstairs without checking the living room. Amara stayed frozen. Amara. His voice called softly from the bedroom doorway a minute later. Are you awake? She didn't answer. Ethan Walker, the man she had loved for a decade, married for 8, was living another life. And tonight, for the first time, she knew she was living inside a lie. She lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling, until morning came, her body aching with exhaustion and betrayal. Sunlight slid across the marble like a blade when Amara finally rose from the couch. Her mouth tasted of old coffee and resolve. The house had that careful post-midnight silence. Everything neat, nothing right. She set the kettle on, smoothed the hem of her robe, and waited. Footsteps on the stairs. Ethan came into the kitchen in an open-collar shirt, hair still damp from a shower, casual like any other morning. He stopped when he saw her on the island, hands braced on the stone. Morning, he said cautiously. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Her voice was even. How was the Fairmont? The kettle hissed. A faint tremor passed through his jaw. Then he covered it with a practiced half-smile. What? The Fairmont. She repeated. How was it? Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a trash truck clanged. Ethan set his phone face down on the counter, aligned with the grout line, buying time he no longer had. How did you? Amara said it was because someone who loves me was there. And because I'm not blind. He exhaled long and quiet, as if something heavy finally agreed to fall. Amara. Say her name, she said. Say it out loud, so we're not pretending. He swallowed. Sloane. There it was. No denial. Only the soft click of a door in a hallway they both knew led to the end. Amara slid a mug toward him. Coffee. He stared at the cup like it might testify. I never meant to humiliate me, she offered. To feed me lies and call it dinner. To hold someone else's hand while telling me you were stuck at a meeting. His eyes lifted. It isn't very easy. She heard the word and felt something inside her settle. Not collapse. Settle like a river finding its bedrock. What's complicated about it? Ethan's mind raced for a clean shape to hand her. None existed. He remembered the charity gala, the overheated ballroom, the cameras, the way Sloane had leaned close and said she admired how he built something from nothing. He remembered feeling taller in that moment, seen in a language he didn't know he craved. He remembered the fear that had chased him since before the money, that without constant motion, he would vanish. I didn't go looking for it, he said. After the gala, we talked. It was supposed to be harmless. Then the business started scaling again. The press got interested and you decided your marriage was an acceptable cost of admission, Amara said. Thank you for the clarity. He flinched. That's not fair. What would be fair, she said, is the truth, without varnish. His gaze flicked to the phone, then back. I care about you. I always will. But Sloane and I, there's alignment. She gets the pressure, the expectations. Amara said the cameras are not unkind. The rooms that clap for you. He opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. I've worked my whole life not to go back. To what she asked softly. To be ordinary. The word hung between them, ugly and honest. He hadn't said it, not now, not like that, but he'd thought it often enough to feel exposed. "I married you before the magazine covers," Amara said, "before the glossy interviews, before the custom suits and the tables that appear when you arrive. I married you when the nicest thing we owned was a second-hand mixer." A memory flashed so sharply he winced her laughing in a tiny kitchen sugar dust in her curls, singing off-key, while he drafted a bid no one believed he could win. He had loved that life. Once its smallness was a shelter. Then, not a threat. "I don't want to lose you," he said, meaning it in a way that terrified him, because it did not cancel anything else he wanted. "You already did," she answered. "You just haven't set the boxes on the curb." He gripped the edge of the counter. "Can we talk? Really talk? See a counselor. Take time. I made a mess. I can fix it." "You can fix a foundation," Amara said. "You can't unbreak trust." He looked down. On the counter, a faint ring shimmered, where his glass had once sweated, and she had once teased him for never using a coaster. A museum label for a private joke already past tense. "How long?" Amara asked. "Be precise." 6 months, he said, then closed his eyes. 8. The quiet stretched until it became a verdict. She nodded as if she were noting the weather. "You should pack a bag," she said. He straightened. "Amara." She said no. Raised voices or plates thrown, just the truth and then the door. "You'll arrange to pick up the rest with notice. I'll have a list of the things that are jointly owned." He reached for her hand on reflex and stopped when she stepped back. Something in his chest lurched. "I never meant to erase us," he said. It sounded smaller than he hoped. Everything started moving, and if I slowed down, it felt like I'd disappear. She what?" Amara asked. "She kept you visible." He swallowed. "She made it easy to be who everyone thought I was, and hard to be who you promised to be," Amara said. "Which is a husband." He nodded once, as if to a foreman calling a measurement. She moved around the island, pulled open a drawer, and set a stack of folded grocery bags on the counter. It was mundane and devastating. "Take these. Start with the closet in the guest room. You can stay at a hotel. I'll give you an hour. After that, I need the house. I'll call you tonight," he said. When we've had a minute." "You won't," she said. "Not until there's something legal between us to keep everything as clean as the counters you love." A bitter smile flickered and died on his face. "That's cold." "It's clear," she replied. He left the kitchen without another word. On the stairs, his steps sounded like someone else's shoes. She listened to drawers opening a zipper, catching the thud of a suitcase lifted from a top shelf. She stood exactly where she'd been when she asked him to say Sloane's name. When he came back down, he paused at the threshold. The bag looked wrong in his hand, like a prop, like a future he hadn't rehearsed. "Amara," he started. "Don't," she said gently, and the gentleness hurt him more than fury would have. "Save whatever you're about to speak for the person who needs to believe it." He nodded, jaw tight. "I'm sorry. I know." He reached for his phone, hesitated, and flipped it over as if granting her access could rewrite the last 8 months. She didn't look at it. He slid the device into his pocket, picked up the bag, and walked to the door. When the latch clicked, her knees did not buckle. She didn't collapse. She stood in the quiet and let the new shape of the room announce itself. The kettle finally screamed. She turned it off. Her hands shook only when she touched her phone. She opened a new message, the screen bright in the clean morning light. "To Nia Lawyer, today. Do you still have Patricia's number?" The reply came before she could lock the screen. "Already texted it." "I'm with you." Amara set the phone down and inhaled once, slow and deep. On the island, the abandoned second mug of coffee sent up a thin ribbon of steam, then none. She pulled a notebook from a drawer and drew a line down the center of the first page. On the left, she wrote, "Keep," On the right, she wrote, "Let go." When she finished the first 3 items under each list, the shaking had stopped. Upstairs, the closet in the guest room yawned, open shelves half empty. A camera was waking up to a different story, somewhere in the city. Amara closed the notebook in the kitchen under a square of unflinching sunlight and reached for her keys. The marble held her reflection, a woman standing, not sinking. Outside, the day waited without judgment. Inside, the truth had been said. That would have to be enough for now. She texted one more time. To Patricia Reyes. "This is Amara Johnson. I need a consultation. Today." Patricia Reyes's office sat 20 floors above the city's noise glass, catching morning light like a blade. The receptionist offered water. Amara declined. She wanted clarity, not comfort. Patricia came out herself, crisp suit, warm eyes, a presence that suggested courtroom steel and kitchen table scents. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances," she said, ushering Amara into a conference room. "But you did the right thing by calling today." They sat. Patricia clicked a pen. "Tell me the essentials. Timeline. Assets. Anything that smells wrong." Amara laid it out with the discipline of someone who had spent a night turning pain into a list, years together. The company's rise, the Fairmont, the name Sloane, the 8 months masquerading as 6. "I don't want a war," she finished. "I want to be clean. And I want to go." "Clean is a strategy," Patricia said. "Gone is a result." She drew a quick grid on a legal pad. "We'll treat this like chess. No flailing, no television theatrics." First moves a preservation letter to his attorneys, forbidding deletion of texts, DMs, or financial records. Then targeted subpoenas company Amex private travel and gifts line items. If he used marital funds on a girlfriend, that's dissipation. Courts don't like dissipation. Amara breathed and felt air reach places it hadn't in days. What about the house title joint? You'll keep it at least as a negotiating anchor. Patricia's pen moved. "What do you want beyond not being tethered to him?" "I want what's mine," Amara said. "Half the liquid assets. No alimony." "I don't wish to check that it comes with strings and reminders." Patricia nodded. "Spousal support is leverage, not destiny. We can refuse it. But I may threaten to ask to move the numbers where they should land." "Understand, I understand." Patricia's phone buzzed. She silenced it. "He will try a narrative that the success is his alone. We counter with the domestic contribution argument, the invisible labor that fueled visible growth. Also, he founded the company during the marriage, correct?" "Yes." "Then there's community equity. We'll bring in a forensic accountant. Calm ones. Not the kind who grandstand." They worked for an hour. Passwords, statements, dates. When Amara left, she carried a tidy folder and a steadier spine. In the elevator, she texted, "Nia retained." "She's a surgeon." Nia replied with a string of sword emojis and a heart. By afternoon, the first move landed. Ethan's private counsel acknowledged receipt of the preservation letter and requested a respectful tone in the future. Patricia snorted softly, then dictated a reply that was so impeccably polite, it stung. 2 days later, the investigators' packet arrived. Patricia laid the photos and statements out like a map. Dinners at hotels that did not hold conferences. Flights billed as client development that led to islands with no clients. Jewelry invoices written in a careful defensive hand. There were messages, 2 printouts in neutral font, names redacted except his and Sloane's. The sentences were curated. Patricia hated gawking, but the gist was enough to draw blood. He had written, "Being with you is oxygen after years underwater. And later I need the noise. If I stop moving, I disappear." No one printed the word ordinary, but Amara heard it a ghost syllable in the white space between lines. "Enough," Patricia said, tapping the dissipation totals. "We keep this clinical. No rage in the filings. Rage helps no one. I'll draft a proposal." The mediation was set for the following week. 1 room, 2 lawyers. 2 people who had once shared a bed are now sharing catered coffee. Ethan walked in with a mid-tier celebrity's poised chin-up tie, muted a haircut that asked to be trusted. His attorney, silver and smooth, nodded at Patricia like an old rival bumping shoulders at a gallery opening. "Thank you for agreeing to mediation," the attorney began, and all velvet. "The parties can resolve this amicably." Patricia's smile was surgical. "The numbers can, yes." They exchanged opening positions. Ethan's side framed the company as his preeminent contribution and offered a split that pretended the last 8 months were a rounding error. Patricia produced a neat schedule showing marital funds flowing into Sloane-shaped drains and suggested an upward correction. Ethan's jaw flexed. He met Amara's eyes for the first time and then looked down. On the table, the leather blotter smelled like a new car, expensive anonymous. The room broke for lunch. In the hallway, Ethan stepped closer than the choreography required. "I never wanted this." "Then you shouldn't have wanted something else more," Amara said. He glanced toward a window as though the light could help. "He said my PR team says to settle fast," and then wished he hadn't. "They want the headlines to be about a new philanthropic wing, not this." "Then you should settle fast," she said, "and accept the part where actions have costs." Back in the room, his attorney slid a revised offer across the table. House to Ms. Johnson. Half of the liquid assets. 3 years of support. Amara heard the numbers. She also listened to the trap. 3 years was a leash disguised as generosity. Patricia didn't touch the paper. Patricia said, "We'll accept the house, the split, and decline support. We'd also like a non-disclosure limited to financial specifics, not to facts already in the public domain. If discovery turns up more dissipation, we reserve the right to seek reimbursement." Ethan looked like someone had pulled the last easy brick from a wall inside him. "No support?" he asked, surprised. Amara's voice stayed even. "I won't be financed by the person who broke us. I'll finance myself." His attorney conferred with him in a whisper that sounded like wind behind glass. A few minute adjustments followed. Q4 valuations paper, shuffling signatures deferred, pending final drafts. The mediator, a man with kind eyebrows, murmured. They were closer than most. As they gathered their things, Ethan tried again. "If we could talk outside of this is outside," Amara said. "The inside ended in our kitchen." He nodded, defeated, but not yet changed. Patricia waited until the elevator doors closed to drop her voice. "You were perfect." "I felt nothing," Amara said. "That's not nothing," Patricia replied. "It's power." The days that followed moved with bureaucratic inevitability, disclosures, drafts, tax ID numbers, the numbing admin of ending a life. When emotions did come, they didn't ask permission. A measuring cup turned up in a drawer where his watch once lived. The first Saturday, she woke to a quiet that didn't smell like his cologne. Grief flared in odd corners, and then receded, like a tide that respected timetables. Her phone pinged on a Tuesday afternoon, while Patricia was on speaker, parsing a clause about closing costs. Naya had sent a link with no commentary. Amara tapped it. Bold type screamed, "Sloane and Ethan, a meteoric romance." Subhead, "From Gala Sparks to Power Couple Flame. Inside the city's new obsession." The article was all gloss radiant photos, anonymous quotes about chemistry and destiny, a timeline that made 8 months sound like fate instead of arithmetic. A final paragraph wondered aloud when wedding bells might ring. Patricia paused on the other end of the line. "You saw it. I saw it. This helps our timeline," Patricia said and meant it. It also hurts. Both can be true. Amara stared at the photo of Ethan laughing in a suit she hadn't seen before, Sloane's hand on his arm like punctuation. Something in her chest cooled rather than broke. The public loved meteors. Most of them burned out. She closed the browser, turned back to the clause, and underlined the sentence that would give her the house outright on the filing date. Ink on paper. A future notarized. Outside, the city kept moving. Somewhere, flashbulbs popped. In Patricia's office, a printer began to hum. In Amara's kitchen, a single mug sat cooling beside a notepad, where she'd written 2 words at the top. The first crossed out, the second circled twice. Keep. Let go. She drew a breath that tasted like flour and something rising. Then she picked up her pen. The house sold faster than sentiment could keep up. A stager removed the pieces that looked like a life and replaced them with a catalog that looked like everyone else's. Amara packed the last box, the battered stand mixer they'd bought when money was a rumor, and left the keys on a marble counter that would belong to someone new by Friday. On the porch, she paused, not for nostalgia, but for inventory, then carried the box to the car and didn't look back. Millbrook was 2 hours and 1 mountain range away, the kind of town whose main street could be walked during a phone call. She rented a small sunlit place over a florist's shop. Narrow kitchen, crooked window latches, wide plank floors that creaked like they were gossiping. The first night she slept on a mattress on the floor, with a stack of plates for a nightstand, and woke to the scent of roses working their way up through the boards. She tried to mourn on schedule, but the quiet asked for decisions instead. She took on 2 modest interior clients to keep cash moving. Then, on a restless morning, wandered into a diner whose sign had lost a letter somewhere around 1998. Inside was polished chrome, a counter with 12 red stools, and a woman behind it whose smile was warm and unblinking. First time. The woman asked, sliding a coffee over without waiting for a yes. Passing through, Amara said, though she had already signed the lease upstairs. The woman said people passing through don't carry tape on their sleeves, pointing with her chin. I'm Evie. Get the lemon curd pancakes. Amara laughed, then surprised herself by taking the advice. They were bright and soft, and exactly the right kind of trouble. She ate slowly. Evie refilled her cup and listened in the way of someone who knew the difference between silence that wanted company and silence that wanted a witness. You bake? Evie asked when Amara said the lemon curd tasted like somebody loved it. On weekends I used to, Amara said. Cakes mostly. I'm better at layers than at frost roses. Evie's eyebrow lifted. You put 3 layers on a plate that fast a whole town will say grace over it. My kitchen's empty from 4 to 6 every morning. I won't trip over you if you want to test some things before the breakfast rush. Why would you offer that to a stranger? Amara asked, half wary, half moved. Evie wiped the counter with a rag that had seen stories. I'm not a stranger to starting over, she said, and I like how you looked at those pancakes. It was as if you understood the labor. The next morning, Amara was at 4 hair, tied back apron, borrowed mixer humming, before the sun decided what it wanted to do. She sifted, whisked, and folded. She burned 1 batch and learned Evie's oven ran hot on the left. She chilled a lemon cream in a hotel pan and centered a cake with the steady hands of someone who had hung 1,000 pictures straight. The impatience of grief softened under the geometry of processed 300 grams of flour, zest of 2 lemons cream until ribbons form. Evie did her own warm-ups at the griddle, singing quietly. By 5:30, the kitchen smelled like citrus and hope. By 6, 2 sheet pans of cardamom rolls were cooling on racks like a row of suns. Evie tasted, closed her eyes, and nodded, as if hearing a note in tune. That cardamom will make a farmer cry, she said. Sell them out front. See what happens. Amara blinked. I don't have a license, or a business name, or a bank account set up for. Then call it a donation box and a test, Evie said. We'll do the paperwork right after the rush. The rolls were gone before the second pot of coffee. A teacher bought 4 for the staff room, but I won't tell if I eat one in the car. A boy with a baseball cap took 1 bite, said a word he shouldn't have, and then apologized with his whole face. Someone asked for a dozen for Saturday and left a number on a napkin. Amara wrote each request in a clean notebook she had not intended to use for anything important. After the breakfast crowd thinned, Evie pulled a chair around to the business side of the counter. All right, Baker, name, permit, account. Can you stand a form? They filled out applications with that peculiar mix of tedium and electricity that means a door is opening. Amara printed and signed, and then very carefully on a line that didn't require it wrote 3 words. Fresh Start Bakery. Seeing them in ink startled her. She took a photo of the page and sent it to Nia, who replied in all caps, and then called to cry laugh for 2 minutes straight. They found a tiny storefront 3 blocks down an old barber shop with a front window that begged for hand-lettered glass. The rent was almost reasonable. The landlord, a man who had opinions about bread but not about leases, eyed the mixer she wheeled in and asked about cinnamon. Cardamom, she said, and he looked like he might forgive cinnamon forever. Permits crawled like they always do. Evie loaned her a second oven until the electrical system was updated. A retired sign painter came in for a roll and left with a commission. The downstairs florist traded peonies for pastry and taught her to keep a display alive under hot glass. The hardware store owner produced a level from his apron and said, "If your shelves are crooked, people will think your pie is." The town did what towns do when they decide you belong. It made room, fussed, and showed up. On the nights she couldn't stop moving, she sketched the space. She refused the fake rustic cliché. No chalkboards that scolded. Clean white tile. Warm wood where hands would touch. A simple menu with the sort of confidence that doesn't need exclamation points. She rebuilt the counter thrice until her palms knew how much a box should land without a thud. Sometimes guilt tampered in. Interior design had been plan A for so long that the pivot felt like betrayal. Then she remembered all the nights she had baked after midnight to steady herself for the next day's choices, and the worry quieted. She wasn't abandoning a skill. She was repurposing it. Space is space. A room still needs flow, whether it holds sofas or ovens. One evening, as she chalked a temporarily closed for inspection sign with no hearts, Evie slid a mug of tea into her hand. When my husband died, Evie said, not as a confession, but as a weather report. I kept the diner open because if I closed it, the grief would eat the booth seats. People kept coming and telling me about their kids' crops and bum knees. One day I realized I could stand up again. You don't have to rush that realization, but I can tell you it's coming. Amara nodded, throat tight in the way that lets truth in. Inspection day arrived with a clipboard and a woman whose earrings meant business. The oven temps were logged, the sinks were judged, and the thermometer numbers were recited. When the stamp landed, Amara wanted to kiss it and frame it. She texted Nia a photo. Nia responded by threatening to drive up and empty the pastry case solo. Opening morning. The line was there before the lights warmed up. Nurses coming off shift, teenagers, documenting everything. A man with paint on his hands who said, I haven't had cardamom since my grandmother, and then stood aside to compose himself. The register sang a clumsy song, and at 10:30, they were out of everything but 2 lemon bars that were a little lopsided. Evie declared it was a superstition and wrapped them for the police chief. At noon, Amara locked the door, leaned her forehead against the cool glass, and exhaled for the first time in weeks. She could see herself in the reflection flower on her sleeve hair, escaping a tie eyes that looked less hunted than yesterday. When she turned back to the kitchen, she noticed the quiet, a generous quiet, earned not imposed. That afternoon, she signed the merchant services paperwork, the delivery agreement with the cafe near the school, and the receipt for a new whisk she did not strictly need, but wanted because it made a better sound. She wrote a list for the next day and tacked it to the wall. Underneath the orders, the batches and the oven timings she added, "Remember to eat." The first week blurred in the way new good things do. There were miscounts. A tray dropped a power flicker that sent everyone into a brief communal prayer, and a note slid under the door that read, "Your rolls taste like morning at my grandmother's table. Thank you." She kept the note in her wallet. On a Thursday evening, her body began arguing with her after the clothes mop and bank deposit. A slow nausea, a wobble in the corners of her vision, a sudden craving for ice that made no sense. She blamed adrenaline, used her teeth, drank water, and returned to the checklist. The next morning it was worse. By Saturday, she stood in the tiny bathroom at the back of the shop tile, cool under her bare feet, a small white box open on the sink. She told herself she was being dramatic. She told herself a dozen sensible things. She followed the instructions with the precision she had given to the day's laminated brioche. She set the test on the counter and refused to look at it. She washed her hands. She counted to 100 the slow way. She thought about lemon zest and the way it perfumes a room. Then she looked down. 2 pink lines, precise as sunrise. The world went very still. Somewhere out front, a delivery truck rattled past. In the mirror, a woman stared at herself, a baker whose hands suddenly shook for a new reason. Amara pressed her palm flat to the cool edge of the sink and let the next truth arrive not with panic, but with awe and terror braided together. 4 walls, an oven cooling, and a new business sign on the door. 2 lines. The bakery's mixer thumped a steady bass line, but Amara's hands wouldn't stop trembling. She hid the little white stick under a stack of parchment, finished a batch of lemon bars on muscle memory, locked the door an hour early, and called Nia. "I need you," she said. 10 minutes later, Nia slid onto a prep stool, eyes moving from Amara's face to the sink, to the parchment stack. "Okay," she said gently. "Tell me." Amara lifted the test with 2 fingers as if it might go off. Nia's breath hitched. A laugh and a sob collided in her throat. "Oh, honey. I wasn't trying," Amara whispered. "We spent years trying before. And now." She gestured helplessly at the humming ovens, the flour-dusted future. Nia took her hand. "Call a doctor. Today." Dr. Elena Martinez's receptionist heard the word positive, squeezed her in, and suggested ginger candies while Amara waited. The exam room was cheerful on purpose. A pastel whale smiled at her from a poster about prenatal vitamins. Dr. Martinez entered with the calm cadence that says everything has a plan. "Congratulations," she said after the initial checks. "Your dates put you early. We'll draw blood and schedule an ultrasound for next week." "Any history I should know?" Amara told her the condensed version, consultations calendars, 2 medicated cycles that ended in disappointment. A marriage that ended in something worse. Dr. Martinez nodded without prying. "Bodies are complicated, timing is rude, and hope is stubborn. Hydrate, rest when you can, and avoid lifting anything heavier than your mixer." "You've seen my mixer," Amara said faintly. Dr. Martinez smiled. "Then avoid it." On the drive back, the mountains looked closer, like they had leaned in to listen. Amara parked behind the bakery and sat with the engine ticking into silence. The part of her brain that ran logistics batches, payroll ovens, woke up even as another part stood in a quiet field of awe. She told Evie that evening after the last table had left, the coffee was set to drip for the morning. Evie listened without flinching, the way she listened to stories about crops and knees. "We'll build you a bench," Evie said. "A bakery bench and a life bench. Who needs to know, learns what they need to know. We'll carry what you shouldn't." "What if it's complicated?" Amara asked. "It already is," Evie said. "And you're still standing." The ultrasound room smelled like lemon cleaner and new beginnings. A nurse dimmed the lights. Dr. Martinez rolled to the monitor and narrated as if she were reading a map she knew by heart. "Okay, there's the gestational sac. And another." Amara gripped the sides of the table. Her mind supplied every benign possibility. A shadow, a trick of light, a nurse's elbow bump. And Dr. Martinez said softly another. Silence rushed in. The speaker thumped a tiny steady sound, then another fainter, but fierce. Dr. Martinez angled the wand marking images with delicate clicks. "I'm going to say the thing, and we're going to breathe together." She turned the screen so Amara could see 4 small pulsing constellations. "You're carrying quadruplets." The word didn't fit in the room at first. It had too many edges. Then the second word arrived, heartbeats, and made space for everything else. Amara cried without drama, the tears that come when your life changes and the body decides to register it. Dr. Martinez handed her a soft wad of tissues and started the next part like a pilot reviewing instruments. "This is rare and high risk. It will mean more appointments and more monitoring. Will involve maternal fetal medicine in Seattle. You will need help at work, and at home nutrition matters. Rest matters. You'll get exhausted, and then more tired than that. But right now, all 4 look appropriately sized for your dates." "That's good news." The nurse printed photos. 4 tiny flags of proof slid into Amara's hand. She tucked them against her chest, as if they might feel the way her heart was misbehaving. Questions Dr. Martinez asked. 100 none with vocabulary. 1 made it out. "When do I tell anyone?" Amara asked. Dr. Martinez said to tell who you trust as soon as it helps you. "You mean the world when you feel like it." "As for him," she added, "without knowing a name ethically, he is part of this story. Practically, we can balance safety and timing. Your health first." Nia came over that night with soup socks and her most persuasive voice. "He has a right to know," she said, soft but unyielding. "And whatever they are in there, they have a right to be known. And to be protected," Amara said. She paced the small living room, ultrasound photos fanned on the coffee table like a winning hand. He walked out for a camera. "I won't let my children become a prop." Nia nodded. "I'm not saying open the floodgates. I'm saying build a dam on purpose, not a wall out of fear." Amara said, "That's a distinction without a difference when you're 4 small heartbeats and a mother who barely sleeps," then winced at her sharpness. "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for bleeding," Nia said. "Just don't decide everything while you're dizzy." They made a list. "Tell Evie. Don't tell the internet. Medical schedule, MFM consult. Start prenatal vitamins. High protein plan. Check insurance. Get a second freezer. Work hire a second pair of hands. Train someone on the morning bake. Move heavy sacks to a higher shelf. Label everything like a submarine." Evie posted a note on the staff corkboard the next morning. "New rule. If it's heavy and named, Evie lifts it." She announced it with a look that brooked no argument. The sign painter added a tiny whisk icon to the bottom corner to bless it. Amara hired a part-time baker from the cafe near the school, a quiet woman named Rosa, who could laminate dough like origami. She bought a stool for the prep station and actually sat on it. She learned the peculiar alchemy of accepting help without feeling like a failure. The MFM consult in Seattle unfolded like a syllabus. A doctor with kind eyes and a spine of steel outlined the best-case timeline and the real-case contingencies. Growth scans every 2 weeks, steroid shots for lungs, later bed rest. If contractions start, Plan A and Plan B and Plan C for delivery. "Can I keep the bakery open?" Amara asked. "Many women keep working in modified ways," the doctor said. "But listen to your body like it pays your salary, because it does." On the drive back, the highway was unspooled in practical miles, flower orders, roster schedules, and a call to the electrician about the outlet that sparked on Thursdays only. Between those miles, the other road ran beneath a nursery that didn't exist yet. Names that had not been chosen, a legal document she never thought she'd draft. She called a local attorney and scheduled a will. Guardianship. Evie and Nia, she wrote on a sticky note and pressed it into her wallet until it became part of the leather. At night, when sleep wouldn't come, she stood in the dark bakery and watched the proofing dough lift, and open a slow breathing that calmed her. She placed the 4 ultrasound prints in a line on the office corkboard above the schedule under the words, "This week." For once, the words didn't scare her. When fear surged, it came from unexpected angles, a stroller that looked like a parade float, the math of diapers, the sound of a laugh in her memory that belonged to someone she wasn't ready to invite back. Instead of fighting it, she let the fear pass through, as you stand in the ocean and let a wave spend itself. Nia kept advocating. "If he finds out from someone else, you lose control of the story," she said one afternoon, folding bakery boxes with unnecessary precision. "I don't want him to hurt you again by accident." "I know," Amara said. "I also know I can't be in 2 battles at once. Right now, it's me and them. Everything else can line up behind that." "So, not never," Nia said carefully. "Just not now." "Not now," Amara said. Saying it made room in her chest for air. She wrote the plan in her neat, practical hand and taped it inside the pantry door. Eat even when nothing sounds good. Sitting, even when standing, feels like penance. Ask even when pride hisses. Appointments, all of them. Tell him when it's safe for them. She circled the last line twice, then closed the pantry and returned to the workbench, where the dough rested under a damp cloth, like something trusting her to get it right. That evening, Evie locked the front door and hung a small hand-lettered sign, "Hours adjusted because life rises too." The town took the hint with grace. Orders shifted to pickups. The early birds learned to stack patience with their coffee. Amara went home, clipped the ultrasound photos to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny rolling pin, and leaned her forehead against the cool door. The apartment was quiet except for the florist's faint rustle downstairs and the music of someone's television across the alley. She opened her laptop and drafted an email to a contractor about reinforcing a corner of the stockroom. She drafted another letter to the attorney about the will. She drafted a third to no one, the subject line. Blank the body, an unsent letter that began, "There are 4." She didn't send it. Instead, she printed the week's schedule and wrote, "Rest," into it like an appointment someone important might attend. In the margin, she doodled 4 tiny hearts, and for the first time, let herself smile without apology. When she finally lay down, the town breathed around her fridge, neon far-off freight train, and sleep found her, the way a tide finds a shoreline that stopped trying to hold. 4 small shadows pulsed on the fridge, often under the kitchen light, and a plan, imperfect and brave, held its shape. It had been 3 weeks since Amara had started listening to her body, like a recipe, paying attention to the subtle shifts of exhaustion and the quiet joy that began to bloom with each passing day. The bakery, once a test of endurance, had turned into a rhythm, a familiar song that echoed in her bones. She let the ovens hum and the measuring cups click settle into her, a new kind of peace that arrived with the certainty of hard work and patience. But then, Like a subtle earthquake, something shifted. It happened one morning, when Amara was wiping down the counter preparing for the first batch of croissants. The bell above the door jingled, and the sound of footsteps followed. At first, she didn't think much of it, assuming it was just another regular customer. But when she looked up, her heart did that strange thing. It did when something uninvited appeared, an uncomfortable skip, a breath held too long. Ethan stood in the doorway. The bakery suddenly felt too small. Amara's hands went still, the rag clenched in her grip. She could see his changes, more silver at the temples, lines of wear under his eyes. He looked older, but not like he'd matured. He looked like someone who had been running from something. The moment stretched between them like taffy. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, and for a second, it seemed like he wasn't sure how to speak. Then his voice cracked the silence. "I'm not here to disrupt anything," he said. His words were careful, but his eyes betrayed him. They flickered between her and the bakery's warm, inviting glow. Amara didn't move. Ethan looked at her, and it was the first time in years that he seemed uncertain, like he wasn't playing a role in their story, but looking for a way to be part of it again. "You're not supposed to be here," Amara said finally, her voice firmer than she felt. She wiped her hands dry on the apron, then crossed her arms over her chest, as if protecting a secret she only knew. "You don't belong here." He seemed to deflate at the words, but there was no defensiveness in him, just an acknowledgement that he maybe understood that better than anyone. He rubbed his hand over his face and exhaled. "I know, I've been a mess. I saw the article about your bakery, and I thought—" "Stop!" she said, her voice cutting through his hesitation. She stepped toward the counter, close enough to feel the years of space between them, but still too far for anything to feel normal. "You don't get to show up here and pretend you're still a part of my life." Ethan's face tightened, his jaw working as though he wanted to argue, but something in her gaze stopped him. The force of her words hung in the air, but there was also something else, an invisible weight they had never shared before. "Amara, I'm sorry," he said, his voice quieter. "I know I've screwed up. I know I've hurt you, and I can't change that. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I do want to know how you're doing what you're doing. I saw the bakery, and it's—" He seemed to choke on the compliment, almost as if it were a foreign concept. "It's beautiful." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked at him, searching his face for some sign of the man she once knew, maybe even the man she'd loved. The man who had walked away when everything had seemed so perfect. The man who'd broken their world for a new one that didn't include her. His eyes were soft now, but held no answers, only more questions. "I've been carrying around this idea of who you were for so long," she said finally, speaking the words floating in her head for weeks. "And now I realize I don't even know who you are anymore. You don't belong here anymore. Not in my life. Not in this bakery. Not in any part of my future." The words hit harder than she'd expected, but didn't break her. They freed her. She had spent too many years holding on to a version of him that wasn't real. She had held on to the hope of what their life could have been, clinging to the remnants of something that had been over long before their marriage had officially ended. He looked down, his fingers clutching the counter's edge, knuckles white. "I understand," he said softly. "I really do. I needed to see you. To see this." He motioned around the bakery, the walls filled with photos. Fresh flowers in vases, the countertop piled high with pastries. "This is who you are now." Amara swallowed hard. She didn't want to let him in. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of watching her crumble under the weight of his gaze. But she wasn't crumbling. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, and now she could see how fragile their past had been. She could see all the cracks she'd refused to acknowledge before. She said, "This is who I am," her voice steady, even if her chest ached with the weight of her resolve. "And it's mine, not yours, not ours. This is my life now. It's been mine for months." Ethan took a slow breath, his expression hardening like he was preparing for something he couldn't change. "Amara, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything from you. I want to see my kids. I know I've missed their lives and I don't expect you to give them to me just because I want them. But I do like the chance to don't." Her words were final. She stepped closer, meeting his gaze with a firmness that surprised them. She had never been this direct with him before. He had always had the power to manipulate the air between them, to twist words and push boundaries. But not anymore. She said, "I won't let you show up in their lives like this," her voice unwavering. "You made a choice, Ethan. You chose someone else. You walked away, and I built something real. And my children won't ever know you as a maybe. They won't know you as a ghost who comes in and out of their lives whenever it suits you. They will know love. They will know security." Ethan seemed to sink into himself, the weight of her words settling in. His shoulders dropped, and the fire that had once burned so fiercely in his gaze dulled, leaving only regret. He didn't say anything for a long time, just stood there silent, staring at her as if trying to reconcile the woman standing before him with the girl he once thought he knew. "I get it," he finally said. "I do. You've built something beautiful, but I want to be a part of their lives. Please don't keep me away." Amara didn't answer immediately. She wanted to say no. She tried to shut the door locket and walk away from this encounter, as if it had never happened. But something in his voice, something raw and open, made her hesitate. "I need time," she said finally. "I need time to figure out what that looks like. But it won't be now, Ethan. And it won't be because you showed up here." With that, she turned, reaching for the keys on the counter to lock the door. She was done talking. The conversation had ended as far as she was concerned, and it was his turn to either accept the boundaries she had set or leave. Ethan didn't stop her. He didn't try to argue. He nodded his eyes, never leaving her. And for a moment, Amara thought he might have understood that the door he had walked through was never meant to be opened again. But then just before he left, he paused. "I'll wait," he said, his voice softer now. "I'll wait for as long as it takes." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. He left the bakery quietly, and Amara locked the door behind him. The bakery didn't feel any different in the wake of his visit. The pastries still gleamed, the coffee still brewed, and the hum of the ovens reminded her that she was building something solid, hers and hers alone. Later, she sat down at the back counter with a cup of tea. The room's quiet, enveloping her. The slight, rhythmic sound of the clock ticking in the corner filled the space between breaths. She was not afraid anymore. The past was gone, and with it the people who had tried to shape her. She was here, and here she was free. The weeks that followed Ethan's unexpected visit were a strange blend of quiet and chaos. The bakery, always her sanctuary, now felt like a battleground for all the decisions she'd put off for so long. Amara had spent so many years chasing a life with someone else, hoping it would fall into place, that it hadn't occurred to her how much strength lay in the absence of others. She had spent so many years defining herself by her marriage and its inevitable breakdown, that she had forgotten to check for the weight of her own story. But she felt it now. The weight of what she had built, what she had created, settled on her shoulders in a way that both grounded and terrified her. Mornings came with a new sense of purpose. The bakery buzzed with life, the scent of warm pastries filling the air, and the chatter of regulars was always a comforting backdrop to the work. Amara had hired Rosa full-time and expanded her hours to keep up with demand. The town loved her pastries, the lemon-curd pancakes, the soft cardamom rolls, the perfectly baked baguettes. Word had spread quickly, and there was always a line at the door before dawn. She had kept her promise to herself. She wasn't letting the past creep in. Not even when the memory of Ethan's words haunted her at night. The image of his face was etched in her mind. "I'll wait." He had said it with a conviction she hadn't expected. He was trying maybe even more than he'd ever done during their marriage. But Amara knew better now. She knew how to put herself first and honor the life she was building without looking back. Still, when the phone rang one late evening, her chest tightened. She recognized the number. "Hello," she answered, bracing herself. Amara Ethan's voice was tentative, almost hesitant, but it was still familiar. "I know you're probably still angry with me, and I understand. But I need to say this. I've been seeing a therapist. I know it's no excuse, but I'm trying to change. I want to be a part of their lives. I want to do it right." She leaned back against the counter, the refrigerator's hum filling the conversation's gap. It was too late for a conversation like this. It was too late for apologies and promises that meant nothing unless backed by action. "I'm not angry," she said, the words slipping out with surprising calm. "I'm just done. I've moved on, Ethan. And I need you to understand that. What we had is over. And I'm not going back, not for you or anyone." There was a long pause. She could hear him breathing on the other end, trying to find the words. But she knew it wasn't about the words anymore. It was about the actions, the choices he had made, and the price he was now paying for them. "I understand," he said finally, his voice quiet, almost resigned. I didn't want you to think I was giving up. But I see now that you've built something strong without me. And I respect that." Amara let the silence stretch. She wasn't sure what she wanted from this conversation, but she no longer needed his approval. She didn't need his validation. She needed her life, which was unfolding exactly how she had hoped on her terms. "I'm glad you're getting help," she said, her voice softer now. "But this is the last time we talk like this. I need space to move forward, and it's best if we leave it here." He didn't argue. "Okay. Take care, Amara. Goodbye, Ethan." She said, the finality in her voice more for herself than for him. She hung up the phone and let out a long, steadying breath. It was done. There was no turning back. The next morning, as Amara worked the counter preparing for the steady rush of early customers, the weight she had been carrying seemed a little lighter. She had made the right choice for herself and the life she was building. The bakery was thriving. The town supported her, and her heart had room to heal. It wasn't just about the pastries anymore. It was about the life she had created with her own hands, the way she had rebuilt herself from the rubble of a marriage that had ended in pain. She had become her own architect, her own protector, and her own mother. The walls she had built around herself, the emotional boundaries she had set, were standing firm. But even amidst all the success, even in the quiet hum of a day that felt like a victory, she could feel the weight of the truth pressing in from all sides. She was pregnant with 4 children. And it was only a matter of time before that truth would collide with the rest of her world. In the quiet moments when the bakery was empty and the ovens cooled, she'd find herself sitting in the back office, staring at the ultrasound photos pinned to the wall. She had been living with the quiet hum of their existence for so long, now 4 little heartbeats growing. But there was no escaping the reality that she was about to become a mother in a way that would change everything. It wasn't just about the bakery anymore. It was about motherhood and what it meant to raise 4 children. 4 little lives that depended on her, that would need everything she had and more. There were days when it felt overwhelming, like too much to carry or handle. The nausea came and went. The exhaustion was relentless, and the weight of her growing belly seemed to press on her lungs, making it hard to catch her breath. She had started to schedule more doctor's visits and more scans. Each one felt like another reminder of her little control over what was happening in her body. But it was also a reminder of how much she had already accomplished. She had built a life from the ground up, literally, figuratively, and now she was about to take the next step into uncharted territory. She had created a business, a community, a place hers. She could build a family too. She did not doubt that. The first week of November rolled in the air crisp with the promise of the holidays, and Amara began to prepare. The bakery was busier than ever, with orders for Thanksgiving pies, holiday pastries, and custom cakes. It was the kind of work that filled her days with purpose and kept her from thinking about the long nights ahead, when the weight of everything, her past, present, and future, would finally catch up to her. Her new hires were working out well, and Rosa was proving to be a quick study, mastering the art of croissants and danishes. But as Amara moved from station to station, prepping dough, arranging ingredients, and folding pastries, her mind would wander to the question she had yet to answer. How would she raise these children alone? Evie had been her constant source of support, the steady hand in a storm, and she had insisted on coming to Amara's ultrasound appointments, holding her hand through the uncertainty. "Whatever you need," she said, looking her in the eye. "You're not doing this alone." Amara had smiled, grateful for Evie's unwavering support. "I'm not doing it alone," she said softly, glancing at the bakery and the family it had created. But there were still so many unknowns. How would she balance motherhood and the bakery? How would she keep her strength up, knowing she was the only one standing between these children and a world that might not understand? The holidays loomed large in the distance, and for the first time, Amara found herself excited. She would not only be celebrating the season, but preparing for the arrival of her children. The business would keep running. The customers would continue to line up at the counter. But for the first time in years, Amara felt like she was stepping into the future with a sense of confidence that was all her own. Her weight was real, but it was also a reminder that she had survived the most challenging part of her life. And now, as the season's first snow fell lightly on the bakery's window pane, Amara allowed herself to dream. She had built a life that was hers, and soon she would make a family. Amara woke to a distant horn, a car's horn that seemed to echo through the quiet morning. Her first instinct was to dismiss it, but it came again, followed by the unmistakable scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. The bakery was alive even in the stillness of the early hours, and she felt a surge of gratitude for this space she had cultivated. The hum of the mixers, the smell of freshly baked pastries, and the soft rustle of parchment paper had become her symphony, a daily reminder of everything she had built. But today, as she slowly slid out of bed and stretched her aching body, it felt different. There was an urgency in the air, an undercurrent of change, making her heart race faster. She wasn't sure why, but the past few months led to this. It wasn't just the pregnancy anymore. It was everything, the work, the bakery, the uncertainty that clung to her like a second skin. She rubbed her hand over her belly, feeling the gentle, familiar reminder of the 4 children growing inside her. There were days she could almost forget they were there, days when the bakery was bustling, and she felt like she was managing everything just fine. But then, there were the other days, the ones when the weight of it all pressed in on her, the fatigue, the worry, the knowledge that in a few months everything would change. The morning sunlight poured through the small kitchen window, casting soft shadows on the table, where she'd written out the bakery's weekly schedule. A long to-do list sprawled across the page. Order supplies, check emails, confirm holiday orders, and ensure the bakery ran smoothly for the next few months. It was the same list she had worked through for weeks, but today, there was a weight to it, a quiet pressure she hadn't understood until now. She wasn't just managing a bakery anymore. She was working a life, a future, and 4 tiny people who depended on her to get it all right. Evie was already at the bakery when Amara arrived. The door creaked open, and the warm, yeasty air wrapped around her like a blanket. There was something about the bakery in the early morning, something peaceful that made everything feel possible. In the morning, Evie greeted her with a cup of coffee, her smile as steady as ever. "Good morning," Amara replied gratefully, taking the coffee. She paused momentarily, watching Evie move around the bakery with practiced ease. "How's it looking?" "Busy as usual," Evie said, nodding toward the stacks of pre-orders lining the countertop. "But I've got it handled. You don't need to worry about a thing. It's all under control." Amara exhaled, relieved. She didn't know how much longer she could keep up the pace. The pregnancy was getting harder to manage as the days passed. The exhaustion, back pain, and headaches all added up. And then there were the little moments of anxiety when she thought about the future, how she would manage the bakery after the babies came, how she would balance motherhood with the demands of running a business. "You're sure you don't need any help?" Amara asked, her eyes scanning the workstations. "Amara," Evie said, her voice soft but firm. "I've got you. I've got us. Don't stress about the bakery. Just focus on yourself and the babies. Everything else can wait." Amara nodded, grateful for Evie's unwavering support. She had no idea how she would have gotten this far without her friend. Evie was more than just an employee. She was family, the kind of person who would go to great lengths to ensure Amara didn't carry the world alone. As the day wore on, the bakery filled with the usual buzz of activity. The scent of cinnamon rolls, fresh croissants, and chocolate chip cookies filled the air, mingling with the sound of the ovens chiming and the whir of the mixers. Amara felt a flicker of warmth inside her chest. This was her world now. This was the life she had built from nothing. And soon, she would have a family to share it with. The first ultrasound had been a revelation, a moment of awe and disbelief that had taken Amara's breath away. 4 heartbeats. 4 little lives are growing inside of her. It had been overwhelming initially, and the reality of it was sinking in slowly. She wasn't sure she was ready for this. She wasn't sure she was prepared for anything. However, as the weeks passed, the baby clothes slowly accumulated, and the nursery began to take shape. Amara looked forward to the future. She had spent so long living in the past, afraid of the future. But now, she saw it clearly. There would be challenges. There would be hardships. But there would also be unimaginable joy, and she would face it all with the strength she had found in herself. At the end of the day, when the last customer had left and the counters were wiped clean, Amara sat at the back table, a pile of paperwork in front of her. The holiday orders were coming in fast, and the pressure was mounting. This week, she had another event to attend, a meeting with the local business association to discuss the annual charity bake-off. She didn't really want to go. Not because she didn't care about the cause she did, but because her body was starting to protest the constant activity. It was hard to ignore how her back ached after standing for hours, or how her ankles swelled at night. She could feel the strain, the physical toll it was taking on her, yet she couldn't stop. There was too much to do. Evie poked her head into the back room. "You're going." "To the meeting?" Amara hesitated, glancing at the pile of paperwork. It felt like another thing she had to check off the list. But she couldn't afford to shut herself off from the world, not when the business was growing, not when there was still so much to be done. "Yeah, I'll go," she said, pushing herself to her feet. The meeting was held at the local community center, a small building that smelled of old books and fresh coffee. Amara arrived early, her coat buttoned up tightly against the autumn chill. The room was filled with local business owners, most of whom she had worked with in some capacity over the years. The conversation flowed easily, bake-offs, upcoming events, and the usual chatter about the seasonal shifts in business. As Amara sat in the back, listening to the conversation unfold, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was her life. This was the world she had fought for, and despite the exhaustion and the unknowns that still loomed on the horizon, she knew that she had created something that mattered. Later, after the meeting wrapped up and she made her way home, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her. She had come so far, built so much, and there was still so much more. But for the first time in months, she felt ready. Ready for whatever came next, prepared to face the future, the uncertainty, the joy, and the challenges head-on. The next morning, the bakery was busier than ever. The holiday orders had started pouring in, and Amara found herself buried in flour and frosting, working alongside Rosa and Evie to keep up. It was the kind of chaos she had come to love, the kind of work that filled her heart with pride. But amid the clatter of mixing bowls and the hum of ovens, Amara allowed herself a moment to breathe. The future was still uncertain, but she had come so far. And as long as she kept moving forward and making room for the life she was building, she knew she would be ready for whatever came next. She looked at her belly, feeling the 4 heartbeats, and smiled. Whatever it took, she would find a way. This was her life now, and she was ready for it. The days leading to the new year felt like a blur of sugar, flour, and frosting. The bakery was busier than ever, with orders stacking up as customers flocked in to fill their New Year's celebrations with Amara's pastries. The warmth of the ovens filled the air, mingling with the laughter of her employees, the hum of mixers, and the clinking of measuring spoons. But despite the festive atmosphere and the bustling energy, a quiet undercurrent of anxiety rippled beneath the surface. Amara couldn't ignore it anymore. The babies were coming. Soon. It wasn't just the physical toll of her pregnancy, the aching back, the swelling feet, the constant need for naps, but the mental toll that was starting to hit. How would she juggle it all? She had always been the one who carried the load, who took on every responsibility with grace and determination. But now, 4 little lives were depending on her. The reality was sinking in more deeply with each passing day. She had built this life, this business, this community of people who supported her. But what would happen when she couldn't keep up with it all? The thought lingered, uncomfortable but undeniable. Her friends, her employees, they all assured her she'd be fine. Evie constantly reminded her that she wasn't alone in this. "You've got a whole army behind you," she would say with a smile, and Amara knew it was true. But the fear still clung to her, a quiet reminder of how much there was to lose. One evening, after a particularly long day at the bakery, Amara sat at the small table in the back room, staring at the calendar on the wall. She traced her finger over the dates, counting the weeks when the babies would arrive. Even temporarily, the thought of leaving the bakery filled her with unease. What if everything fell apart without her? What if the business that had become her lifeblood faltered? Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting her spiral of thoughts. She glanced at the screen, half expecting another message from Evie or one of her other friends, but it was a text from Ethan. "I'm here if you want to talk." For a moment, Amara considered ignoring it. He had been reaching out more often lately, and each time it felt like a test she wasn't ready to face. But then she realized she hadn't talked to him in so long. It was always just the superficial, polite exchanges. This felt different. It could be exhaustion speaking, or the realization that she didn't have all the answers. She sat back in her chair and typed a quick response, trying to keep the tone neutral. "There's not much to say." His reply came almost immediately. "I understand. But if you ever feel like you need to, I'm here." Amara stared at the screen for a few seconds, the weight of his words settling over her. She hadn't wanted to admit it, but something had shifted inside her over the past few weeks. The anger she'd once held for him, the hurt, had started to soften. She was no longer focused on what had happened in the past, but on what was coming next. As much as she hated to admit it, Ethan was still tied to that future, whether she wanted him to be. She sighed and leaned forward, her hand on her belly. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the babies. She could try to protect them from the messiness of her past, but eventually they would ask questions. They would want to know about their father, who had been absent for so much of their lives. Taking a deep breath, she typed again. "What do you expect from me, Ethan?" He didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, Amara thought maybe he had given up. But then, after a few minutes, the familiar ping of a new message broke the silence. "I expect nothing from you. I want to be a part of their lives when the time is right. And when you're ready." The words were simple, but they carried weight. She couldn't quite decipher whether she believed him or not. The past was clouded with too many broken promises for her just to let it all go. But something in his tone, something vulnerable, made her pause. She put the phone down and rubbed her temples, feeling the tension in her neck and shoulders. It was getting harder and harder to balance everything. The bakery, the babies, the questions about what the future held. She needed answers, not from Ethan, but from herself. What kind of future was she building really? The next morning, the bakery was quieter than usual. The rush had subsided after the holidays, and the normal hum of activity felt muted. It was the first time in weeks that Amara had a moment to herself, to sit back and think, without the pressure of customers' orders or the next batch of cookies waiting to be made. She sat at the counter, her coffee cup in front of her, and took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of her thoughts pressing in. She had built this life for herself, but she wasn't sure if she was building a future she could live with. She wanted to be the woman who could do it all, raise her children, run her bakery, and still hold on to the pieces of herself that made her feel like more than just a mother or a business owner. But was that even possible? Could she be everything she wanted, or would she lose herself? Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was Evie. "You okay?" The message read. "You've been awfully quiet." Amara smiled softly, grateful for the constant check-ins for the people who cared enough to ask. She had been so focused on holding everything together that she hadn't stopped to let herself breathe. She had been so focused on the future that she hadn't looked at the present. That could be the problem. She sipped her coffee and texted back, her fingers light on the keys. "I'm fine. Just thinking. A lot on my plate these days." Evie's response was quick. "Want to talk about it?" Amara hesitated, her mind drifting to the conversation she'd had with Ethan the night before. She wasn't ready to talk about that just yet, but Evie had been her anchor for so long, and she needed to let her in just a little. "I've been thinking about everything about the babies, the bakery. What happens next?" She typed slowly. "I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I can do it all." The reply came almost instantly. "You're doing it already. You've done more than most people could even imagine. Don't let the pressure of it all make you forget how far you've come. And as for the rest, we'll figure it out together." Amara let out a shaky breath, her heart swelling with gratitude. Maybe she didn't have all the answers, but she didn't have to have them right now. The future would come whether she was ready or not, but she would face it. She would find a way. And she would do it with the people who cared about her, who believed in her. The babies were coming, and she wouldn't let fear dictate how she faced this new chapter. The bakery, the future, her family. She would figure it out one step at a time. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Amara felt a sense of calm settle over her. The unknown wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. Whatever came next, she would be ready. Amara was prepared for the journey ahead with the support of her community, her friends, and her own unshakable strength. She was no longer just building a bakery. She was building a life, and nothing was going to stand in her way. The first signs of spring were beginning to emerge, and the bakery was blooming along with the season. Amara had made it through the hardest months of her pregnancy, and each day as the weather warmed, so did her heart. The past year had been nothing short of transformative. She had built a life for herself, hers, and hers alone. And while the upcoming arrival of her 4 children filled her with a sense of awe and a touch of anxiety, she was ready. The bakery had been thriving. The community support, the loyal customers, and her growing team had all come together in a way Amara never imagined when she opened the doors. The dream she had held onto for so long was no longer just a dream. It was a vibrant, bustling reality. Each order, customer smile, and passing day was a testament to her perseverance. The hard work, the struggles, and the sleepless nights had all been worth it. But of course there was more to come, more challenges, more unknowns. And with 4 little ones on the way, Amara had more on her plate than ever. But she had made peace with the uncertainty, knowing she didn't have to figure everything out immediately. Sometimes you have to trust that the pieces will fall into place. One warm afternoon, as Amara was kneading dough for her famous cinnamon rolls, Rosa walked in, an envelope in her hand. "You've got a letter," Rosa said, holding it out. Amara wiped her hands on her apron before taking it. The envelope was thick, formal, and had the address of a local charity event printed on it. She opened it carefully, her heart beating faster as she read. Rosa said, "You've been nominated for Best Local Business Owner of the Year." Her voice excited. "They want you to attend the awards ceremony next month." "Can you believe that?" Amara blinked the words, taking a moment to register. "Wait, what? Me?" Rosa nodded, beaming. "Yes, you. It's incredible, right? You've worked so hard, and now people are noticing." Amara couldn't help but smile, a mixture of surprise and pride bubbling up inside her. I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this." "You've earned it," Rosa said firmly. "You've built this bakery from the ground up, and now everyone sees it." It was a moment of validation that Amara had worked silently and without expecting recognition. But it was more than just a nomination. It was proof that her efforts had not only sustained her, but had also woven her into the fabric of the community. She wasn't just running a business anymore. She had become a part of something much bigger. After Rosa left for the day, Amara sat quietly in the back office, her mind whirling with the letter's implications. The bakery was her life, her passion, but now it symbolized everything she had overcome. She thought about the early days, those first moments, when she wasn't sure if it would survive. She thought about Ethan, the pain and the baby steps she had taken toward rebuilding her world. She had done it. She had built something that was hers. Her phone buzzed with a message from Evie. "I heard about the award. I knew it was only a matter of time before people saw how amazing you are. You're going to knock them dead at the ceremony. Don't forget about us little people when you're on that stage." "Okay," Amara laughed aloud, the tension in her shoulders easing. She quickly typed a reply. "I'm not forgetting anyone. But you're right. I am going to knock them dead, and I owe it all to the fantastic people around me." Evie responded instantly. "Don't forget the bakery needs a celebratory cake. It's a tradition, and this will be a huge celebration, so it had better be one of your best." Amara smiled as she set her phone down. The support of her friends was unwavering, and it was a reminder that she didn't have to do this alone. She'd come far, but still had so much to look forward to. And now, with the babies on the way, the award ceremony, and everything she had built, she was exactly where she needed to be. The day of the award ceremony arrived, and Amara stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the dress she had bought for the occasion. It was a simple, elegant black dress, but not over the top, just how she liked it. She ran her hands over her stomach, feeling the familiar movement of the babies inside. They had been quieter lately, but she knew that meant they were getting ready for the grand entrance. Evie arrived at her apartment just as she was about to leave. "You look stunning," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "This is your night." "I'm still unsure about all of this," Amara admitted as her nerves improve. "It's just a nomination, right? What if I don't win?" Evie grinned. "You've already won, Amara. Don't you see? You've built something that matters, and that's bigger than any award." Amara smiled back, her heart full. It had taken so long to get here, but Evie was right. Winning or not, she had already achieved something incredible. They arrived at the venue, a grand hall filled with sparkling chandeliers and the buzz of conversation. It was everything Amara had imagined, elegant, formal, and a little intimidating. As they walked through the doors, she could feel the eyes on her, the recognition of what she had built. It was the same feeling she got when she saw the bakery filled with customers, their smiles wide, their laughter echoing in the air. It was the validation of her hard work, the proof that she had done it. When her name was called as the winner, Amara was frozen in place for a moment. The applause that followed came from nowhere and everywhere at once. She stood, her legs suddenly shaky, and went to the stage. She felt an overwhelming sense of pride as she took the award. It was hers. She had built it. "Thank you," Amara said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "This isn't just for me. It's for every person who has ever walked into my bakery, believed in me, and supported this dream. It's for my team, my friends, and my family. I couldn't have done it without you." Her eyes caught Evie's as she returned to her seat, and she felt a flood of gratitude. She had made it this far, and now she needed a community, a purpose, and the strength to face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with excitement and reflection. The ceremony had been a turning point, not because of the award, but because of what it represented. It symbolized the hard work, the sacrifices, and the unyielding belief in herself. Amara had always believed in the power of community, and now she had proof that it worked. As the weeks passed, her due date loomed closer, but she felt ready. The business would survive, the bakery would continue, and she would handle the transition to motherhood with the same strength that had carried her this far. The future was uncertain, yes, but it had always been. Only now, with the babies on the way and the award in her hands, she realized the truth: she had already created her future, and now it was time to live it. Before we go, don't forget to comment below what has been your favorite part of Amara's journey so far. And if you love this chapter, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up with Amara's journey as she continues to build her life, family, and bakery empire.